intelligencesquared.com.
Thank you very much. I want to start by criticizing the colonialist way in which this debate has been framed. Let me just remind you of how we were invited here. It started off by saying that the British Empire has a mixed legacy. On the plus side, we brought railways and the rule of law. And then in the aftermath of World War II, our rapid retreat from empire was a bit too hasty. So it's hardly surprising that our former colonies blame us for the subsequent wars and tensions. Now, this preamble suggests that we brought railways to far-flung places. It talks about our rapid retreat from empire. And it suggests that our former colonies blame us for what has gone wrong since the empire's final collapse. So who exactly are we, and just what makes up us? Does it mean that everyone in this hall identifies with the rulers of the British Empire? Is everyone in this country obliged to see themselves as the heir to an imperialistic tradition? Surely not. For the world has changed in the past 60 years, and Britain more than most. Descendants of the empire builders now share this small island with those who were once the empire's subject peoples. They share the same schools, they are taught the same lessons in class, yet their historical experience is wholly different. So we need to frame this debate in terms that both groups can understand. For some of us may come from families that were once slaveholders or took part in campaigns of extermination, while others here will have come from a tradition of slavery or count themselves lucky that they survived being on the receiving end of empire. Others, yet again, may have been honorable servants of empire or honorable collaborators in the imperial experiment. But each person will come to the discussion from a different historical point of view. One other thing. The British often forget that their empire was a proselytizing Christian empire, waging war against the Mussulman, who waved the green flag of Islam in their resistance wars in India and the Arab world, and in African countries like Uganda and Nigeria and Sierra Leone. Muslims today, both in Britain and elsewhere, may have a less than rosy memory of empire. Now, I would oppose the motion that we have before us, and I would go much further. I would argue that those countries should not only blame the empire for what is going wrong today, but they should complain far more vigorously than they do about the disastrous effects of colonialism, which are, of course, continuing to this day. Indeed, I think the colonies have a very good case for demanding reparations for the treatment they received. There is something else. The reverse side of this motion is that the British should stop blaming themselves for their evil empire. For that is what this motion is really seeking to achieve. The British should forget about their empire and move on. Yet, curiously enough, not even Michael Gove wants that to happen. Britain was a horrific experience for almost everyone who was forced to participate in its expansion. Remember the convicts and political prisoners who were sent off to distant gulags? Soon they became themselves the imperial oppressors, seizing land that was not theirs and slaughtering the indigenous population, men, women, and children. And not just in Tasmania, but all over Australia, the Americas, and to some extent New Zealand. Remember, too, the public schoolboys who were educated to become petty tyrants in the outposts of empire, and then fought in conscript armies to put down popular rebellions. Remember, above all, the slaves and the subject peoples, forced to work and produce at someone else's command and for someone else's benefit. They were beaten and flogged, hunted down with dogs and hanged and shot from guns. So there should be some things upon which we can all agree. The empire was an empire of violent conquest. The British did not march ashore to be greeted with open arms by the local inhabitants. When British ships landed on Australia in 1788, they found Aborigines standing on the beach. They were shouting, "Warra, warra, warra." And when inquiring what manner of salutation that might be, the British were told that it meant, "Go away, go away, go away." That was the message not just of the Aborigines, but of all colonial peoples. The British met with resistance on every continent. It took 90 years to conquer India, several decades to occupy Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and Ceylon, many years to seize the disparate countries of West and Central Africa and the Middle East. I've just published a book about the resistance of these subject peoples, and I discovered, rather to my surprise, that there was a rebellion every year over 2 centuries somewhere in the distant stretches of the empire. There was repression too, that became more brutal over the years, and as the technology developed. Cannon and rifles to start with, followed by machine guns, and in the 20th century, the extensive use of the aerial bomb in Iraq, in Somaliland, in the Sudan, in India, in Palestine, in Egypt, in Malaya, and in Kenya. The empire was also economically violent, not just not giving people social services. The economies of individual colonies were forced into straitjackets that suited the interests of Britain. An official report on the islands of the Caribbean in 1950 hinted at what was wrong. Officials in the colonial office, it noted, held to, quote, the mystical view that the Almighty meant some countries to specialize in manufactures and others on agriculture. That was the colonial straitjacket, and it continues to this day in many former colonial countries. They are right to complain. From beginning to end, the empire was a racist project. Indeed, it got worse over the years. The British imperialists promoted a sense of racial difference. They created feelings of inferiority and resentment among their subject peoples, feelings that are still there, not least because the British keep reminding them that they still need imperial advice. It is positively indecent in the 21st century that the British should be revisiting the scenes of their old imperial interventions in Iraq and Afghanistan, and more recently in Libya. And I note that the MPs on our panel all voted for this war. Okay. A memory of violent intervention in the lives of peoples over several centuries is not something that disappears overnight, nor even in decades. The imperial experience may have been conveniently forgotten in the imperial heartland, but it remains deeply etched in the consciousness of all former colonial peoples. They are absolutely right to blame the empire for their continuing difficulties, and I would invite you to oppose the motion. Thank you.